Okay, this is Monday's lesson, and it's kind of an overall review. So if you can find your factoring notes and then turn them over, I'm going to basically take some time to break down all of the different factoring methods just for you to review for the test tomorrow. So the first two methods have to do with GCF, and we skipped that first unit on GCF, so we're really just applying it to factoring. So remember, you always want to do GCF as a first step, if possible. It will always simplify things if you can take a GCF out. So for the first example, please do 5x minus 15x cubed. And as a review, we look for what these have in common. They both have a 5x. So we pull that out front. And when we pull that out front, that really means dividing. So we're dividing 5x by 5x to be left with 1. And we're dividing 15x cubed by 5x. We're left with negative 3x. We check inside here to make sure this is fully factored, and it is, so we're done. Okay, here's the next example. So you can do factoring by GCF when it's a little bit more complicated as well. So in this case, let's see, the GCF looks like a 2. So we're left with 5x squared plus 24x plus 16. And that's just the first step, because now we need to continue to look to see if we can factor this. Well, since it's a trinomial, we can see that it's not a perfect square trinomial because 5x squared is not a perfect square number. So this is one of those instances where we have to do the x method. We need to find two numbers that multiply to get the product of 5 times 16, which is 80, and two numbers that add to get 24. Okay, well, 20 times 4 is 80, and 20 plus 4 is 24. So those are our two numbers. So now we're going to separate this apart. 5x squared, and I'm going to put the 20x with the 5x squared, and I'm going to put this term of 4x with the 16. Now keep in mind that we're bringing this GCF down every time. And now we're going to factor by grouping. So now we group these two together. They have a common factor of 5x. We're left with x plus 4. We bring the plus sign down. These two terms have a factor of 4 in common. And remember that all of this still, we're carrying down this GCF of 2. So now in factoring by grouping, these each have an x plus 4 term, comes out front, and what we're left with is 5x plus 4, and we bring our 2 down. So that's a good review on GCF in multiple steps. So take a minute to do this factoring by grouping and factoring a trinomial when there's a coefficient of 1. Okay, so here I'm going to take out a b. I'm left with b squared minus 5. And here, I know that I want what's in parentheses to match up over here. So I notice that with the b squared term, I'm going to need to factor out a negative 3. So if I take a factor of negative 3 out of negative 3b squared, I'm left with b squared. And a negative 3 out of positive 15, I'm left with minus 5. So now we can finish this up, and we get this. So factoring by grouping, you're going to see for sure tomorrow. This next one, when this coefficient is 1, it's a real easy one. We just need to find two numbers that multiply to get 40 and add to get 13. Oh, let's see, 8 and 5. think it is. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 plus 5 is 13. And because this is a 1, we don't have to do complicated grouping. We can just write x plus 8 times the quantity of x plus 5. And we're good. Okay. This one we've done multiple times. So just as a review, we multiply these two together. 5 times negative 8 is negative 40, negative 18. So we need two numbers that multiply to get negative 40 and add to get negative 18. So that's going to be negative 20 and 2. So looking over here with the 5, negative 20 has more of a GCF with 5 than 2 does. So I'm going to write 5x squared minus 20x plus 2x minus 8. And now I do factoring by grouping. So I take out a 5, sorry, a 5x, left with x minus 4. Take out a factor of 2, I'm left with x minus 4. So we finish here. Okay, so I feel like we've done that pretty well. I do want to review what it means to use a graph to factor. So to use a graph to factor, we're going to take this polynomial and we're going to substitute it in for y sub 1. So what we want to do is when we graph this, we're interested in finding the zeros, the points that it hits the x-axis at. So notice it hits the x-axis at negative 3 and at positive 7. So if the zeros are when x is negative 3 and x is positive 7, what that means is that when we break this into two terms, we want to write an expression here so that when we substitute negative 3 in for the expression, it will equal 0. So negative 3 plus 3 is 0, and 7 minus 7 is 0. So that you always put in the opposite of what the 0 is in terms of factoring. So on your test, you'll have to answer something like this. What do factors of a trinomial tell us about the graph? They tell us where the graph will hit the x-axis. So if we had something like this, this is going to hit the x-axis when x is negative 8, and this is going to hit when x is positive 9. Okay, and the last two that we want to review are special products. We've got perfect square trinomials, or we've got a difference of two squares. Okay, so if something's a perfect square trinomial, we have to check first. So you take the square root of the first term, take the square root of the last term, and if you multiply those and double it, it has to equal this middle term. Well, that does work because 4x times 5 is 20x, doubled is 40x. So yes, it's a perfect square trinomial. So once you know it's a perfect square trinomial, you can immediately factor it into this form. You take the square root of this, that's your first term. Square root of this is your last term. You check your sign up here, and if this is positive, it's a plus. And just to review, to make sure that you understand, 4x plus 5 quantity squared really means this. And the last one, the difference of two squares, I feel like you guys had that pretty well. That factors into a binomial that's added and a binomial that's subtracted. So to figure this out, you take the square root of the first term, You take the square root of the last term and you factor that. Okay, please make sure if you have not done so already that today you use the Teacher's Edition to check your chapter review that was assigned Friday. I left a note that that needed to be checked in class, so make sure you do that. Here's the final review here, and then what you're going to work on for the remainder of the hour is an additional practice test. Hope you guys are doing well and not having too much fun. I will be home soon. Bye.